So, what are some of the recent developments along this topic? The National Tourism Plan, released in 2012, called for a high-end gaming facility, I guess along the Monte Carlo type model. And in the run-up to the 2012 election, both parties committed to a referendum on gaming. And in a general poll that we conducted in February of 2012 found that 46% were in favor of gambling and 43% opposed. From a political standpoint, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So what do? Right? Also, when this task force was put together, the religious community expressed opposition. Muslims came out and said we should band with Christians and we should fight this thing. So all of that's in the background. Now, I couldn't find this reference when I wrote the paper, and I didn't have time to do the research, but I found it now. It was in February of this year that the premier gave the earliest hint that they may not go the referendum route. And this is what he said in the Royal Gazette. It was a general interview, and this was sort of at the end of it. He said this: "It is always politically safe to say that we'll go to referendum and let the people decide. But is that really in the best interest of the country? We need to make some decisions that are in the best interest of the country itself." So that was the first instance of we may not go this route. And then if you go and you look and you Google this, you'll find that there are a number of occasions where it came up again. Are you going to the referendum route? Yes, we're going. We're committed to it. And then, of course, we know what happened last month. So what is the way forward? What is the way forward? Now, earlier I had mentioned about the purpose of the green paper to induce visitation. That was the main reason, because it's an activity that a significant amount of people value. And the secondary reason was for tax revenue. Well, in the summer of 2009 ear visitor study, which is done by the government, this question was put to the actual visitors. 66% of summer ear visitors said that they would either probably not or definitely not visit Bermuda if casinos were allowed. Probably not or definitely not. 2/3 from the government survey. But if it's to induce visitation, it's certainly not for those who are already coming. And of course, you can develop another market. The other thing I found interesting too was that in the green paper it stated that 65% of United States travelers value casino gambling. This coming from the American Gaming Association, which is actually the public relations arm of the gaming industry. So it's not a source that I would hold as credible. And in fact, in trying to find another statistic that will back that up, I could not find anything that will collaborate with that 65% of those who, and I don't know what they mean by value gaming. So now we have the Tourism Authority, and they're taking up the national plan, which, by the way, calls for a high-end casino. I understand that the Minister of Tourism made a statement today. I have not heard the news, so I can't say exactly what he said because I'm only repeating what I've heard. But he did have a statement about what is going to take place. But the Tourism Authority is going to be charged with this, and we don't have anything, but I understand today he said there'll be town hall meetings and things forthcoming. So I'll leave that where that is. But whatever happens, time is actually short. Arrivals and expenditures were down in 2012, and in fact, expenditures by air arrivals were some 85 million short of what was predicted in the Tourism National Plan. I don't know what they are for this year. Those figures haven't been released, but we're already down. So that means we've got to do something to generate tourism and, of course, generate revenue and generate jobs. I think we're all on the same page there. Even though tourism doesn't bring in a great deal of foreign exchange revenue, what it does do is have a greater multiplier effect. In other words, if you had an impact of 10% increase in tourism, the economy will feel that. If you had a 10% increase in international business, you're not going to feel that as much. In fact, I think there were some figures the finance minister indicated that was up some number. I'm not going to repeat it because I don't recall it, but it was up very high. But you don't necessarily feel the impact of it. One, because there's not always a physical presence on the island, and two, it just don't have the same rounds of spending. Because the tourism, you're going to feel it at the airport, the taxi driver, the restaurants, the hotels. That money is continuously circulating, and so an immediate bump in tourism is going to be felt. But tourism is not going to get us out of it because we essentially put all our eggs in one basket unless we develop some sort of third tier. So these are the things that matters for the country. There have been some positive developments along the tourism front. You've got the Green family investing in and buying the Hamilton Princess and also the Sinesta property and developing there. So there are some signs, positive signs in the industry. Is gaming the way forward? Well, since I've written that article, I've been given I've seen posted on Facebook a number of articles, and this one in particular struck me. It says, "Is Atlantic City and Las Vegas the new Detroit?" What's happening in Detroit? Detroit is bankrupt, and they're pointing out that the number of casinos there that are struggling raises the question. If you read the article, you will see, this hotel owes, and some of the money that these hotels owe, you would think they're small countries with the level of debt that they have. And so that begs a question. And it begs a very real question. If these established places are in trouble, what is, if I use a marketing term, the unique selling point of Bermuda to get them here? Now, I'm not saying they can't, because I think initially the risk is among the developers. And if they say that we can bring the people here, we can get them here, should we say no? Yeah, so I think you have to look at it from all sides. But the reality is that Atlantic City and Las Vegas are in trouble. There was one hotel I remember from, and this is in my paper, I think it's the Mirage Hotel, that they were laying off 400 managers in an effort to save $200 million annually. That's why I said like a small country, the level of debt that they were in. And so if they're in debt, and it's surprising because the odds are against us, the one who goes and gambles. So that's the reality of what's happening in Las Vegas and Atlantic City. So the way forward, Ozaski in 2008, and there have been others. Peter Murphy, a friend of mine, has written a book called Community Approach to Tourism. And basically they're saying that because of the sustainability aspect of it, we should have a community approach to tourism. In other words, there should be engagement with the community if you want it to be successful and sustainable. And that is what I think needs to take place in order for us to go forward.
The tourism minister, and I'm going by memory, said that they're looking at the integrated casino model, which means qualifying hotels will be allowed to have casinos within their facilities. Okay, and you won't find, gaming machines, in pubs and everywhere else.
You won't?
No.
Okay.
That's a plan that the government is pursuing now. That's what they said at the press conference today. I'm just reporting what was said. I'm not supporting the government or anything like that. And they also said there will be no restrictions on residents, Bermudians, to actually go into those casinos. And the minister also reported that basically the impetus for all this was obviously economic, and primarily developers saying, look, our financing is not going to happen unless we can have casinos in these hotels. So it looks as if they're looking at, hotels of a certain size, 100 rooms or plus, might be allowed to have casinos. So my question is, with the studies that you actually cited tonight, do they make any distinction between standalone casinos and casinos within hotels? And would that actually make a difference if not?
That's a good question. I don't think they made a distinction, but I was assuming that they were standalone casinos, because I think in North America, that's primarily what they are. They're standalone. I drove from Calgary to Lake Louise 2 years back, and I think I must have saw 5 standalone casinos. So I'm not certain 100%, but my assumption was that these were more standalone entities. Because we are a resort destination, obviously makes sense to have it within the resort. So in the Bahamas, they've got it as part of resorts. I don't think they have, but I stand to be corrected, a standalone casino in the Bahamas. They tend to be, at least the 2 I'm aware of, are in hotels. Does it make a difference? I think the difference comes with whether or not locals are allowed to gamble, because all the social disbenefits happen when locals are allowed to gamble. So to allow cruise ships to open their casinos in port doesn't affect the local population. And so if that were the case here, then the concerns about the social disbenefits would be severely diminished, and the risk would be primarily on the developer end.
Sure. The second question, if you don't mind, is given the social costs for locals, would it be, in your view, a fair trade-off not to give locals the to restrict their freedom of choice to actually, gamble if it was allowed for visitors?
In this day of rights, I'm not sure if that could be done. The Bahamas went the route of saying you will have a referendum, and if the voters vote against having locals, then we will abide by it. If it went that route here, I'm not a lawyer, but I think it comes down to a right. Why do they have a right to gamble when I don't? And so that could be an issue. It may not be an issue, but I see that as a potential issue if Bermudians were discriminated against. That's what it would amount to. And whether or not there'll be a case in the Human Rights Commission because I'm being discriminated because of my place of nationality. But I see my lawyer friend somewhere in the back, so he might want to address that afterwards, or anybody else who can address that.
But I would really love to see more conversation and discussion on revitalizing in other ways. It seems that we've stopped at the question of casinos. To me, I just don't see the benefits. I see the risks associated with the casinos. I don't see the same risks associated with sports, marketing, and all of entertainment. bands, and what happened to the entertainment in the hotels. So I think I would love to see some of those discussions happen first. I think casinos have been played out. Gambling, it's past. Okay, so you may take a few minutes and enjoy watching people lose their money. That's entertaining for some people, but really I think the risks outweigh any of the real benefits. I would love to see our country develop a vision about what we want for our country as it relates to tourism, but also as it relates to its people. I don't want to be dumbed down by casinos. If I have guests to the island, I would like to show them the island and have them enjoy the island, not go into some casino and pump their money into a machine or a roulette wheel or whatever, because we know the house wins. That's a fact. So I would like to see us elevate our vision for Bermuda and for this country. I happened to be speaking with somebody today, and they were saying how they go down to the Bahamas and how they enjoy the islands, and it's a lot slower, it's quiet, it's a lot to do with water sports, etc. On this particular island, they said that they don't have gambling. And so I said, well, what do you think about gambling if you're talking about the Bahamas? And he said, interestingly, the islands that do have gambling are very seedy. They're seedy. I don't want Bermuda to be known as a seedy destination. This is my home, and I care about this country, and I would like us to elevate our dreams and vision for Bermuda. Just let me see if there's... the question about... I don't understand why the question about the casinos being left open on the ships has not come to fruition. That was an easy thing. They could charge those ships for allowing them to have the casinos open while they're in port. I don't know why that wasn't done. So it seems like we're not taking incremental steps. It seems they're focused on this casino thing, and that's it. They don't want to hear anything. And to the point about the OBA doing a flip on the referendum, I don't think that the reason that they gave for backpedaling on that was good enough. I think a friend of mine said tonight that the reason they gave for not holding the referendum was because the PLP indicated that they were going to veto it or whatever, go against it. Well, number one, I don't think that was proven. I think that the opposition leader stated that wasn't the case. That's not what he said. But number two, I don't think that's a good enough reason anyway. I think we deserve more. That's it. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
If we're going to have a casino, we cannot allow our local population to gamble in it, bottom line. And if we do have any, I hope they're in Somerset and St. George's where they can be gated, like Morgan's Point or the old St. George's Club Med and Holiday Inn. Thank you very much.
Okay. While she's bringing up, I should make it clear the purpose of this meeting was to disseminate information about the potential social disbenefits. This was in the making for a long time. When I wrote the paper, both parties had committed to a referendum, and so this was part of the process in terms of doing something for the public. So that's a recent development, and that's more of a matter for the people.
Very much, Mr. Riley, for your presentation. I know it's turned into a bit of a sort of group debate, but I'd like to kind of focus back on you. On the small point of casinos on ships, I believe they do pay a license fee, depending on how many visits they have per year. So that does bring in some revenue to the government. Apparently so, if you look at the piece of legislation. But just to your point about the variety of things that you've covered, you talked about some increases in crime, for example, surrounding casinos. Do you have some examples of the types of things that are related, the types of crimes that are seen, and what's your feeling about how closely it's linked to the fact that it's a casino? So, for example, if someone's walking out with their winnings and they get robbed, then it's because there's a casino there, or is it because there are more people, is it because there are more drunks, or whatever? Interested in your views on that. And then in parallel with the tourism, you talked about that questionnaire to leaving tourists, and they seem to say that it would actually be negative for them if there was a casino here. I'd just be interested if you know how the question was phrased, because it's either whether I'd be interested to know whether the question included whether if there was a casino here, would that be a driver to make you come here is also an interesting question. It's probably a different one. But potentially, if there was a casino here, therefore, we would actually lose those tourists that you mentioned had said no or were opposed to it. I have obviously lots of other questions because I'm interested in what you said, but I don't want to monopolize the mic.
I'm going to deal with the last one first, because that's what is fresh. I think the question, and by the way, the question is no longer on the air arrival survey. It is still on the cruise port. I don't know what the answer is for it now. But in that survey, it would, if there was a casino in Bermuda, would you probably come, probably not come, definitely not come? I think this was sort of the range. I can probably find out what the exact wording of it was. And to that question, 65% said either I would probably not come or definitely not come because of the casino. So that's where there's clear indication that the casino itself, that's not what they were looking for in a Bermuda visitation. Now, in terms of the type of crime, the paper by Grinnells goes into great detail. I just mentioned robbery and murder, but there are a whole range of crimes. Now, the other question, part of that is an interesting one. Whether it's coming out of the casino, I can't remember specifically with regard to how that was done, but the paper is quite voluminous, and I'm not sure, though, it deals with whether they're coming out of there. It may well be. The one thing I think in a general sense that I will say is that Bermuda happens to be a very small place. And so in some respects, everything's going to be contained in Bermuda. We're very, very small in that result. So the impacts are going to be felt. It doesn't take too long for those impacts to be felt. But to answer your question specifically in terms of when the crime occurred, I don't exactly have that information.
But the types of crimes generally associated, I think.
I would think robbery, I'm sure prostitution and all of those things, those types of crimes, those are certainly on the increase, yes. Good evening.
I just wanted a little bit more information, if you have it, on Bahamas, where they stand. They did have their results released today on their referendum, as you had mentioned, and that is the 5-year period. To me, that was very interesting, where they didn't really see any decline until after 5 years, where they had put all that money aside to be able to assist, and then there was a decline in general from the studies that were given. So do you have any information on where Bahamas are right now? In
terms of the crime?
In terms of the crime, in terms of that period of time, and then having this referendum again?
No, and the interesting thing is, when I went to Bahamas I'm going back now, maybe 25 years ago, locals couldn't gamble then. So they have already been restricted. In terms of the crime has increased like others, but I don't know if there's any studies, and there may be some studies that have been done to indicate the impact of casinos. I would imagine that they would be less than the study I indicated, because in those jurisdictions, the locals were not barred. So I would imagine where you restrict the locals, the impact will not, the increase in crime you would not be able to attribute directly. Maybe there's some indirect, but not directly to the casinos if, I should backtrack. Going back to your point, if it's happening when you're coming out of the casino, it doesn't matter who's in it. So I would sort of say I don't know until I get the information. Evening.
Coming into this evening's meeting, I did hear the news was Mr. Crocker was indicating that government's position is fixed, and he also said in his news conference that the government plans on having at least 6 educational meetings across the island, educating people on this gaming issue. So that being said, I also think that it's somewhat ironic, in actual fact, that about a week or so before Christmas, CNN was running a program that ran for quite a while, whereas people were making an issue with respect. So there was a presentation by the gaming fraternity to have gaming introduced in other states in the U.S. And that right now that position sits before a committee who's reviewing all those issues that they brought up at the time. The other point that I want to make here is that the gaming aspect of it, in fact, on several of the radio shows, I've heard people who are involved in that industry who are saying that if the government don't provide for gaming by those pub or the local residents, then those people who are proposing hotels will not be interested in developing a casino. And we're saying that the hotels need casinos to be able to run their program. But if the government is going to say, or if there's any legislation that's going to say that locals can't participate in it, then they're not interested in the gaming process. Now, the view I take with respect to gaming is that gaming on all aspects of gaming, as far as I'm concerned, if there's going to be legislation with respect to gaming, it should cover all aspects of gaming, not just those people who want to go into casinos and those people who want to play the footballs, whatever. I'm talking about across the board gaming, right? I can say to you all that I spent some 28 years going back and forth to Las Vegas, not as a gamer. My money's too hardly earned, but I was going there, and I can see the impact that it had. And I can tell you, just in Las Vegas alone, on the strip part of Las Vegas, everything goes, right? Everything goes. You can walk down the street with a beer or alcohol in your hand, doing whatever, with your clothes off, whatever, is a part of the process. And I'm fearful of that process finding itself in here, right? I have a religious background, and I can say to you that I like to refer to Romans 18 that talks about those people who you associate with, at the end of the day, you will be tarred with the same brush, right? So you cannot say at the end of the day that this is not what you're about. But if you are in association with people who are about that, then you're more likely to be associated in such a way whereas that you can say that you're not breaking the law, but if you're with a criminal, then you're suspect. Right, so in terms of the development of this gaming stuff, I can say that that I'm not in favor of it. I don't see where it's going to be beneficial. The last point I want to make is that those people who were making the presentation on the CNN program were making it with respect to the fact that the government had taken the position they were allowing gaming based on the fact that the funds from those gaming was going to go into the educational system. And they had determined that none of that money that was promised to go into the education system made it into the U.S. educational system.
Okay. One thing I will say, because I did hear my friend and colleague Nelson Hunt, who's involved with the Morgan's Point development, he did say on the radio one day that if anybody is able to get the financing for him without a gaming component, he will give them 2% finder's fee. So from a development point of view, he would know. So I think that's why we need to have the discussion. He's got skin in the game, and they don't have the financing. But he said if anybody, so in other words, they will build the hotel. If they got the money, they will build it. But I said if you can get it without a gaming component, he will give you, and I'm sure he'll say he stands by that 2% finder's fee.
Okay. Good evening. How you doing?
Okay.
I'm thinking about sustainability.
Yes.
If you look at the East Coast, with all the casinos, they have millions of people that can access them. Mm-hmm. We have a finite number of beds in this country. So, since we have less than 5,000 beds now.
Less than 3.
Well, less than 3, stand corrected. Since we have less than 3,000 beds now, and even if we filled up every harbor with a cruise ship, how on God's green earth are these casinos supposed to attain profitability with our limited numbers that we can expose to them?
That is a question. When you look at the revenues and the generation of revenue, it doesn't look like, even though we're talking about millions, it doesn't look like a great deal. And that's why I mentioned that we have a very small community. Middle class is, so that's if a developer comes and says we can bring them in, then again, that's why I said that the risk is on the developer.
If Donald Trump was to offer to build a casino in Bermuda, would we want Donald Trump to build a casino in Bermuda? Or a hotel, a hotel?
One more? Okay, last question. Oh, okay, one more and then we're done. After you.
Thank you. Just quickly picking up a little bit on what the lady said earlier on about Bermuda being a quality destination and not wanting to spoil it with potentially what you referred to as other seedy destinations. Just interested in your point of view in terms of if we did have a casino, how would that affect Bermuda's reputation, which currently I think is pretty good for a variety of reasons, business, but also, it's a jewel, it's beautiful, we've got lovely seas, oceans, lots and lots of things that we can already offer if we bring the right people. And the sort of chicken and egg question, I think Vegas and Disney are examples of build it and they will come. But here and now, is it a question of if we build a casino, then magically these thousands of people will appear and spend gazillions of dollars in Bermuda, where we could attract them with lots of other quality things that, incidentally, we already have?
I don't think anybody who is pro-gaming will say to you that is a panacea. One of the things that I had a difficulty with when the legislation was passed for allowing cruise ships to open their casinos in Bermuda was the support by the Chamber of Commerce, because you have now given them another reason not to get off the ship. And it's going to be open, I think, 9 o'clock. But okay, so they're not coming off. But then something the minister has stated that there is of the cruise ships, and I haven't seen the particular information, but he said that of the cruise ship passengers, only 30% gamble. Now, 2/3, if we just use the summer visitors of your air arrivals, said they would not come as a result. So then if you start to open up all of these gaming facilities, the very real question is who is going to populate them? Because the vast majority of the visitors who come now are not going to do that. And so that's why the issue is having Bermudans gamble, because especially when they're going off, we're talking about this period now till March, there are less visitors in, and so do they close down in the winter or do they remain open? We don't know all these things, but there's a very legitimate question. And I'll speak only to the referendum on this point. A referendum to me was a way of engaging the people on a very important issue that can change, and in my paper I speak to changing the DNA of the visitor, because if the majority of your air arrivals are saying this is the reason we come here partly is because you don't have this, and if you have it, that means we're going to have to look for places that don't have it. If you can change the DNA and bring them in, so that's an option. It's going to cost money to mount a campaign to bring them here. And so the referendum was the people's way of saying, or giving the people an opportunity to say exactly how they felt on the issue. If something important was coming down the pike that concerned the international business sector, should there be consultation with the international business sector? If there was something that's coming down the pike that is going to concern the Chamber of Commerce, would there be consultation with the Chamber of Commerce? If there was something that is going to affect the Employers' Council of Bermuda, would there be consultation with the Employers' Council? And if there was something that was going to affect the unions in Bermuda, wouldn't there be consultation with the Trade Union Congress? I suspect the answer would be yes. So something that's going to affect, or could potentially affect, the whole DNA of this country, who are the stakeholders? And should they not be consulted? I leave that there. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay.